At the grand auditorium of Westbridge Academy, an elite private school tucked away in the wealthiest district of the city, the morning sunlight spilled through the high stained-glass windows and danced across rows of polished oak pews, casting hues of gold, crimson, and blue over the sea of parents dressed in expensive suits and elegant dresses, all gathered for the most anticipated event of the year. Graduation Day, a celebration that marked not only the achievements of the young men and women sitting nervously in their black gowns and mortarboards but also the culmination of years of sacrifice, tuition checks, extracurricular investments, and constant pressure to meet the extraordinary standards set by families of privilege and influence, where senators' sons, judges' daughters, heirs to multinational corporations, and protégés of political dynasties now sat waiting to hear their names called, to walk across the stage, to have their picture snapped with a diploma that would open doors most people in the world could never dream of. The stage itself was adorned with heavy crimson curtains, banners bearing the school's crest, and bouquets of fresh white lilies whose fragrance lingered in the air, and seated on that stage was Claire Donnelly, the daughter of one of the most powerful CEOs in the nation, her blonde hair tied neatly beneath her graduation cap, her posture straight, her face glowing with the poise and confidence expected of her. Because from the moment she was born, Claire had been raised to be the perfect image of success, her every step charted by the invisible expectations of her family, her school, and her society, and today, as the valedictorian chosen to speak before the graduating class, the teachers, the parents, and a list of prominent guests that included governors, congressmen, and philanthropists, she was supposed to deliver a polished, predictable speech about ambition, excellence, and the bright future ahead. But deep inside, Claire carried a secret story, one she had wrestled with sharing, one that could either inspire or scandalize depending on how the audience perceived it, and as she nervously clutched the note cards she had prepared, she thought back to the countless moments that had shaped her, and not the glamorous ones people assumed. Not the yacht trips with her father's business partners, not the expensive boarding school summers in Europe, not the charity galas where she stood smiling in designer gowns while photographers snapped her picture beside politicians and celebrities, but the quiet, hidden, often overlooked presence of a man who moved through the school hallways pushing a mop bucket, carrying tools in a battered old toolbox, unlocking doors when students forgot their keys, fixing leaky pipes, shoveling snow before dawn so the sidewalks would be safe, and doing it all with a kind of silent dignity that few noticed and fewer respected, for to the privileged world of Westbridge Academy, he was just the janitor, a background figure, invisible until needed, his name barely remembered by most students, though to Claire, his name, Mr. Harris, was etched deep into her memory, for he had been there in moments of her life when no one else had, moments that no one else even knew about, and as she gazed down from the stage now, her eyes scanned past the gleaming rows of proud parents and chattering graduates, searching the edges of the auditorium until she found him, standing unobtrusively near the side exit with his mop bucket, wearing his gray uniform that was always neat but never new, his dark skin glistening slightly with the work of setting up the chairs earlier that morning, his strong hands resting on the mop handle, his posture humble but steady, and when their eyes met for a fraction of a second, Claire felt a surge of courage that washed away her doubt, because she knew her story was not about repeating what the world expected but about revealing what they had failed to see, and so she took a deep breath and remembered the first time he had spoken words that stayed with her forever. She had been 15 years old, a sophomore then, struggling under the crushing weight of expectations, drowning in advanced classes, extracurricular activities, endless lectures from her father about how she needed to always be number one, and one afternoon, after failing a math test that she had studied for all night, she had run into the girls' bathroom, locked herself in a stall, and sobbed quietly, terrified that she was disappointing everyone, when she heard the creak of the door and a calm voice on the other side saying, "It's all right to fall down, you just have to get back up again," and she had come out to see Mr. Harris standing there with his mop, his expression kind but firm, and though she had been embarrassed, though she had expected him to scold her for being in his way, he instead told her, "Fall down 7 times, get up 8. That's what makes you stronger than the rest," and those words had struck her deeper than anything her teachers or her parents had ever said, because they came not from someone trying to impress or demand, but from someone who understood hardship in a way her privileged world never had. In the years that followed, Claire noticed him more often. How he worked tirelessly in silence, how he never lost patience even when students were rude, how he showed up in snowstorms before anyone else, how he stayed late to make sure the school looked perfect for events like this, and slowly, she began to see that his resilience, his integrity, his humility were worth more than all the trophies and medals displayed in the glass cases of Westbridge Academy, and it was that realization that pushed her to write a different kind of speech, one not about herself, but about him, and now, standing on the stage, her fingers trembling over the note cards, she made a decision in front of the hundreds of eyes fixed on her. She dropped the cards on the podium, lifted her chin, and began to speak from the heart, her voice echoing through the hushed auditorium as she told the story of a man who had taught her the real meaning of success, who had given her courage when she had none, who had taught her the value of persistence, and as the audience shifted in confusion, expecting a speech about ambition and achievement, she raised her hand and pointed directly at the man in the shadows by the exit, and the room gasped. Collectively, because in all their years, in all the ceremonies filled with polished praise for donors and dignitaries, no one had ever expected the daughter of the school's wealthiest benefactor to single out the black janitor, yet there she was, her voice steady and clear as she declared, "That man right there taught me what greatness really looks like," and silence fell so heavy that even the restless shuffling of gowns ceased, as parents, students, and teachers all turned to stare at the man who had been invisible for so long, the man who now stood frozen, eyes wide with disbelief, as the spotlight of truth finally illuminated him on the most important day of the Academy's year.